Hey.
Alex Wick, I'm the CEO and Master Forester at Cascadia Carbon. Um, you're all here at a social impact demo day. You definitely understand climate change is the problem, but also the market to solve climate change is broken. Currently, it's primarily a voluntary market, and it lacks transparency, and it's very difficult to validate. Um, Additionally, another huge thing is there are over one third of Americans are homeowners or landowners. But if you have one tree in your front yard or 10 in your backyard or heck, even 1,000 in your back 40, you're unable to monetize the carbon offsets your trees are producing. So Codex allows individuals and enterprise to step up and join the global fight against climate change. We've built essentially Airbnb for offsets. And so how it works is it's a two-token system, and I threw in the link into the chat earlier, a link to our green paper, which explains this in a little more detail. But the idea is we create digital twins of individual trees. So a lot of our competitors, Pachama, Flow Carbon, sell carbon offsets by the acre or hectare. And instead, we go down to the individual tree level, and we use a combination of LiDAR, photographs, and AI and ML to analyze a tree to determine not only its location and species, but its carbon sequestration potential. Um, a large oak, for example, in your front yard can sequester 60 to 80 tons of carbon over its lifetime. And currently, homeowners and landowners are just leaving that on the table. So we allow these smaller landowners to engage in this marketplace, which is a voluntary marketplace, and produce these codex tokens, which are fungible tokens. So it's a NFT, which creates fungible tokens as it grows. Um, as I mentioned, Airbnb for offsets, that's exactly how it works. If you have a tree, you tokenize it, you get a generally designed, for my background is one of them, NFT image, which corresponds with your living tree. And then every 6 months, you update the tree, take another photograph of it, and you receive your Codex tokens for that time period. This is all done on the blockchain using low carbon energy. And of course, these offsets have value that are actually projected to grow massively over time because the demand for offsets is much greater than the current supply. And so, where does this come in for investors? I mean, it's literally an evergreen investment. And I guess this is not technically accredited investors only, so I have to be careful with what I say because it's a public forum. But the idea of investing in something that's continuously growing and actually grows exponentially faster over time just makes sense. As well, there's other revenue models. We can actually get revenue from both sides. So when you instantiate an NF tree, a digital twin on our network, that costs you $10 for the homeowner. But then we turn around and sell these offsets that your NF tree is generating to corporations like Microsoft, JetBlue, or heck, even the coffee shop next door. And so these two revenue streams combine, and we actually return a percentage of that revenue, 50% of the revenue from businesses back to the NFT instantiators, our users. Of course, we have competition. Flow Carbon, Pachama, and Nori are three of them. There's also third-party verifiers like Vera and Gold Standard, who have actually come out recently and said that tokenization is not the way forward. We view them as dinosaurs. Of course, tokenization goes against their vested interests. They charge between $50,000 and $100,000 to come out to your land if you have 100 hectares or more of forest and verify that the trees, in fact, are there, are alive, and are sequestering carbon. So we disrupt this market. And as you probably know, trees are tremendous carbon sequestration mechanisms. That's
Mm,
what they do.
mm,
And they actually sequester carbon according to their size. It's a
mm,
direct correlation. It has something called leaf area index. So essentially, the more leaves a tree has, the more carbon it pulls out of the atmosphere.
mm-hmm.
which is why larger trees are more valuable. Um, that being said, we can't just rely on large mature trees to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere. We need to plant, you know, there's different numbers out there, but probably at least 1 trillion more trees.
Mm,
Um, there's also the issue of like, if you're planting 1 trillion trees, where are you putting them? And if they're in rural areas, in sort of fixed second growth stands, they're
mm,
much more susceptible to fire, which is actually a serious problem. And as the world continues to warm, the incidence of fire increases.
mm,
So our trees, because they're single tree selection, they're likely, in your front yard or backyard, they're much less likely to burn in a fire. But back to your example, when those trees were cut down, hopefully by a trained arborist, um, they were likely milled up either on site or locally nearby, and then sold for timber, wood, tabletops. They definitely have value.
mm,
Um, the cool thing about that though is as long as that timber stays in the structure, so as long as the structure doesn't catch on fire or isn't destroyed and sent to the landfill,
mm,
the carbon in that wood is stored indefinitely.
mm,
So, I mean, anytime someone cuts down a big mature tree, I encourage them to plant, 2 to 5 young ones.
mm,
Um, but that actually is not as big of a problem as you might expect because that carbon does stay stored in the tree.
mm.